The sisterhood wound is if a woman is embracing their dark feminine energy, it's inherently a threat of what if my partner then wants them more, or I'm not lovable when they're around. And there's a scarcity mentality that comes up if another sister is in their dark feminine energy. But that's not the case at all. Like, women can be around each other embracing their erotic energy, and it doesn't take or detract from your own erotic energy. What we can start rewriting as empowered women, though, is if we sense in ourselves that a friend is using that sexual energy to hook someone else's attention, we can actually start asking the question of, babe, like, what's actually going on? Like, do you need a cheerleader of how amazing you are and a reminder of how amazing you are in this moment, so you don't need to hook the energy? And I've noticed whenever I've been able to have that like really direct conversation with someone, usually they can soften and go, yeah, I'm actually having a really hard time at the moment and I just needed like a bit of attention and a reminder. Then they can realize that the safety is to come to a sister and ask for that affirmation, rather than needing to hook someone's sexual energy to prove that they're lovable.
Dr. Jae West, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So take me through the context of your life that set up your studies, the social experiments, and then the work that you do now.
Yeah, well, I will say from the get-go, it's a very eclectic and colourful journey. Like, if I was to describe my life in one word, it's colourful. But yeah, it's a fusion of many different things. So I'll take you back. I was always in childhood, the very flamboyant child that would get dressed up with feather boas and put on elaborate dance parties for my parents and my family, always equipped with like a toilet roll. I thought that was a microphone. But yeah, there was this very flamboyant side of me that I really, really loved. And then through some of the education system, the doubts started to come in. Like, I remember this experience in primary school where I was so excited to impress the teacher and impress my peers that I knew something, that I like blurted out what I thought the answer was to a question in class, and it was wrong. And I remember that moment of retraction of like looking around and all the other kids were like giggling, and this fear of failure just started setting in. And yeah, I remember I got a little bit below average in one of my tests, and then I was put straight into having a tutor because succeeding was a marker of love and getting love and affirmation, you know, whether it was from parents or other people. And so I really started to equate success with being lovable, which fostered some really good characteristics in me. I'm very determined. Like, if I put my mind to something, I don't have any doubts that I won't be able to succeed at it. However, there was like this rat race that started to like be cultivated in my mind of like do, accomplish. And I didn't always find like what I actually was passionate about. So yes, the performance part of me was very strong, but I started to like direct a little bit more towards academics, my academic studies. So I studied science at UWA, and given I loved it as well, very studious. Wouldn't go to the pub, would just like be at home with my books, nerding out and learning. And I do love learning. Like, I'm a very curious person. But that took me all the way to doing a PhD, and I got 3/4 of the way through the PhD, and I was studying a theory called self-determination theory. And it's the idea of being able to look at where our motivation comes from. Does it come from an intrinsic place and have a sense of autonomy, or does it come extrinsically driven? And I was like, I'm doing the same like studies at the same university as my dad, but majoring in like health science, which is my mum's passion. Is this actually my journey, or am I just living out expectations that I've kind of absorbed from other people? And on the side of doing the PhD, I was still doing my creative stuff. So I was dancing for drag queens from a young age, choreographing and performing, so that flamboyant side of me. I was a dance teacher. I was teaching at some different dance academies. In 2013, we started a group called The Liberators, which was about creating social experiments for change in public. So whether that was, giving high fives or hugs to strangers or starting a dance party on the trains, which then took me on a tour around Europe, took me on a tour around America. I created 2 social experiments which were around what I am passionate about, which is self-esteem and body image. So I did one social experiment in London where I blindfolded myself with a sign saying, I'm standing for anyone who's gone through an eating disorder or self-esteem issue like me. Draw a love heart on my body to support self-acceptance. And then just stripped down. So I was in my underwear in the streets of London and let people draw on me. And through that experience, and then another experience that I did in New York where I let the public shave off my hair till I was bald, I started looking at, wow, if I address the things that I feel shame around or that I have doubts around, it actually has this sense of courage and empowerment. And, I started really finding my niche of finding pathways to be courageous and live a life that's in alignment with my values rather than what's been absorbed from society or parental expectations or family expectations. And then end of the day, family wants the best for you, but realizing that each generation have different themes. So the generation before needed safety through security. And I feel like our generation has this freedom to be able to question and go, well, what life do I actually want? And so through that, we're accumulating the academics, we're accumulating like the social experiments and the art forms. I was still dancing and choreographing. And the last jigsaw puzzle piece that was in there was, my spiritual practices. So I started yoga when I was 7 and had done a teacher training or a mentorship with a teacher for a year when I was 19. Yoga was just threaded through my life, and then did another 2 teacher trainings in my early 20s. And there was something about being able to sit and observe my thoughts and observe reality and not take things so personally that just really resonated. And so I started interweaving all of these things together into the alchemy framework, which is now what I effectively do, which is combining archetypal work with, I guess, the philosophy of the chakra system with dance, emotional intelligence, and self-expression. So usually through performance.
Was there a price tag to some of the inauthenticity you felt during these university times when you discovered that you were potentially copying and modeling things that your parents had done? At that point in time, was there a driving force that, like, internally, were there signals that, like, how was inauthenticity showing up in your body as well? Like, pain is often the driving point for people to make a change. Like, were you feeling and experiencing problems associated with that?
Yeah, great question. So anxiety was definitely one part. And I would say that, anxiety sits in our 3rd chakra. So that identity that I'd created, that if I'm not successful, not doing well, then love is going to be removed. And because I had such high pressure on myself to, like, be successful, anxiety was just showing up all the time. And I think when you're really deeply aligned with something that you're passionate about, there is more of a willingness to make mistakes versus actually having that mirror of, like, is this actually what I want? Was showing me that the anxiety and the high expectations that I had on myself was maybe a mirror of, like, maybe there's something else for me. And I really love my parents in the fact that I got to debrief with them. It was like I got to this framework. Like, I also think that I had to do the PhD to get where I am now and doing the work that I did. So everything was so aligned. And the beautiful thing about the self-determination theory is that it really shows you a roadmap of how to create intrinsic motivation. And there's 3 things. So autonomy, taking control of your choices. And so one of the steps that I did was I sat down with my parents, I sat down with my friends, I sat down with my supervisors and owned that I didn't know if this was the path for me anymore, and that I was questioning what I was supposed to do with my life. And I feel grateful in that every single person was like, you can do whatever makes you happy. There is no pressure. I'd actually like internalized what I thought was external pressure, but there was no pressure from other people.
Was that because that is probably the hardest thing for people to do, is start that conversation at that point in time. So you felt, were you scared going into those conversations?
Absolutely. And, fear shows you care. Like, you care about other people's opinions of you. I cared what my parents thought. If they turned around and they were like, no, you should do this, it would have been really hard to hear, because you want to impress the people that you love, or you want to feel like you're doing the right thing. But sometimes that's about you making your own path and being able to stand up against people that have differing opinions. And usually other people's opinions of what you should be doing is more a reflection on their own story rather than your story. But yeah, you really rewrote things for me in terms of permission to have desires and have desires for my life, because before that point, I was so quick to give away what I wanted for what I thought I should want.
Because I often find when it comes to anxiety, if it's not grounded and anchored in a place of our truth, like the anxiety doesn't feel worthwhile. Because I know for me, when I have a vision of like, okay, let's say the podcast, and I know the steps and, going out of my comfort zone towards that, like it feels like I'm willing to pay that price because it's an expression of who I am and what I want to create in this world. But when we come from a place of someone else's wishes and they're projecting their belief systems onto us, like we do get the feedback system that can either be like the depression or the disease through our body. And I don't think we listen to that as well.
Yeah. And sometimes just the process of having the conversation reignites it for you. So for me, like I had those conversations with everyone. I took 6 months to really like off for the PhD. I was like, I'm just going to create this time and spaciousness for myself. And if I come back, it's because of myself. So any of that anxiousness or any of the other symptoms that come up, I can only point the finger at myself because I'm the one that's made the choice. And at the end of the day, that's what I ended up doing. Was when I really sat with it, I was like, no, there's something about, even as egotistical of like having a doctor title or being able to finish what I start, or being able to meet stress and not be scared of it, but take on challenge and know myself as someone that doesn't shy away from challenge or perseverance or commitment. And, the research has taught me so much. Like, research for me was actually very confronting at first, because when we go to school, we're told this is right, this is wrong. If you memorize this, you'll get A's. If you get this wrong, then, you fail. Versus when you come into research, you realize how everything is always changing. And what you need to cultivate in yourself is, rather than security in answers, security in your value of continually questioning. And I feel like I was a changed person through that process of, facts are actually always changing. And what we think is going to give us security is actually not going to give us security.
That's why I want to be a philosopher, because all they do is ask questions. They don't have to have answers. They just ask questions.
Yeah.
Take me into those public social experiments. I reckon they're incredible. I've done one, but I don't think they really compare to the magnitude of them. So take me into like the actual in-person detail of going through it.
Yeah. So I'll talk you into the first one, because the first one felt really vulnerable for me. And so I do talk very openly about the eating disorders that I've gone through. So I went through both bulimia and anorexia. And yeah, it was a reclamation of my story. I was in a meditation that I started contemplating this idea of like what would be a courageous action to rewrite my story and stand for compassion over perfection. And I saw a really incredible TED Talk by Amanda Palmer. She's from the Dresden Dolls, and it's about the art of asking. And she did I guess I wouldn't call it a social experiment. She pretty much stripped naked and let her fans write on her like whatever they wanted. And I was like, wow, that's a really vulnerable situation to be in. And then my mind started ticking of like, well, what if it was about body image? And sometimes when we've gone through distorted relationships with our body, actually being able to do mirror work and be proud of the body that we have is an important step, and not having shame for our body. But I think I was about 24 when I was in Europe, and I shared the idea with a very dear friend, Peter Sharp, who's the founder of The Liberators. And he was just this like yes and person. It's just like, let's make it happen. Let's like rewrite this story that you have. And I remember being in London. And so I grew up in London for a couple of years. So it felt perfectly aligned that I was going back to this place that I'd grown up from like 3 to 7 years old, and deconditioning and rewriting this story for myself. I was dressed in like a bodysuit, found this spot in Piccadilly Circus. It was a Sunday, like lunchtime, so middle of the day in summer. But it was so confronting because there were families around, the cops were walking around, and I was like, I'm going to get arrested for indecent exposure. I'm going to get in trouble for this. And again, hitting up against that nerve and that weak spot for me of wanting to get things right, the idea of getting in trouble was really confronting for me because it was like, love's going to be removed or you're going to be judged. But something about it was just, it was a non-negotiable. I knew that I was going to do it, even if I was going to get in trouble, or even if, I don't know, if I was going to get backlash from it. And so I remember like walking up from the train station, like shaking, like I had the board in my hand and I was like trying to write the note, being like, what am I doing? Hadn't told my parents I was going to do this. Like, I was like, I'm just going to show them a video afterwards. It's just too confronting for me. And I just remember blindfolding myself and stripping down. So I was standing there in my underwear, shaking, and that feeling of the first pen leaving my hand was just so relieving. It was like, oh, I'm not alone in this process. I'm not alone in these thoughts. Because when shame kicks in, it becomes, oh, I'm the only one that's experiencing this. It's something wrong with me. I'm broken, X, Y, and Z. And so we shut off from connection, which is actually where you get healing, is being able to own what you have shame around and share it with the others. Because most of the time there's going to be someone out there that's like, oh, me too. Like, I've been there too. And that was pretty much the story. I stood in Piccadilly Circus for about 45 minutes and had over 100 love hearts drawn on me. And I had the cops come up behind me at one point and they were just asking if I was hydrated, and they stood off to the side the whole time, just making sure nothing happened to me. Like, they were little guardian angels really of seeing vulnerability and wanting to protect vulnerability and courage. And one of them afterwards even came up and was like, can I give you a hug? So I'm like there with this policeman, like with all these love hearts on me. And it was just like, wow, such a rewriting for me of relationship to authority, relationship to my body, relationship to vulnerability. And then the conversation, the global conversation that happened afterwards, like the video went crazy, millions and millions of views within a couple of hours, or like a couple of days, sorry. Then I was on Sunrise, like we were in Berlin, like I was getting up at like 1 a.m. in the morning to be on an interview in Sunrise. And it felt very strange, but also really aligned of, I'm just talking about my story and it's going to resonate with some people and it's not going to resonate with some people. Like, there was also backlash of people being like, oh, attention seeker, and that's rich coming from someone who's still like really thin, like she doesn't know about body image. And that's, we never know what someone else is actually going through, and it shouldn't just be about what someone looks like on the external. So that's, where all the mental health stuff comes up, whether it's eating disorders, anxiety, depression. You have no idea what someone else is going through.
100%. No, that was an awesome video to watch.
Yeah.
What was the ripple effect that had in your life at that stage?
Yeah. So the first thing that I will say is me starting the process of rewriting what was important for me. Because as we were talking about before, I had, I guess, created an idea of my lovability was based on what I achieved versus what I stood for. And the more that I started to align with like what values feel important for me and who do I want to be known as, who do I want to be perceived as, and it always kept coming back to like, I want to be perceived as someone who takes courageous actions. I want to be able to be vulnerable and own all parts of myself in the human experience. And so I think that was this, like the starting process of what I now do with these like brave discussions and these brave topics that I start looking at. And, you know, it was also that change in my relationship with my parents to an extent. Like they both burst into tears watching the video and were so proud of me. And, you know, there I was being like, oh, they're going to be embarrassed by me being in my underwear in the streets. But no, they could really resonate with the vulnerability of it. And, you know, they saw me at the worst of my eating disorder. Like it was my mum breaking down in tears, scared for my own life, that actually started snapping me out of the anorexia. And so then for them to see where their daughter was now and reclaiming that sense of power, because you feel very powerless when you're in the depth of eating disorders. It's very overwhelming. It's very, you don't feel in control of anything. So you try to control your food. So this was a different way. This was a healthy way of gaining control of my life and taking actions for my life.
With shame, it's something that a lot of us obviously experience in our own ways in different magnitudes, but there's a lot of awareness around shame. But when it starts to show up internally, it's almost like we ignore all of these signals that we're getting, even though the awareness around our mental health is so important. Given all the studies you've done, all the research, the personal experience, is there something that we're misunderstanding about shame in ourselves that is holding us back?
Yeah, I mean, I love Brene Brown's research in this area and that difference between guilt and shame. Like guilt says I did something wrong. Shame says I am wrong. And I think we can internalize, thought patterns too quickly, and we aren't told to cultivate this questioning of the thoughts that we have. And that's where I think like Eastern philosophies, whether it's like meditation and stuff like that, starts to get us questioning our thoughts. Like a thought comes in, especially if it's an intrusive thought, and actually having the skill set to go, is that actually true? Like, you know, like for the example of like, I'm a bad person. Like you might make a mistake and do a bad action and you can learn from it, or you can internalize it and go, yeah, I really am a bad person. And then that affects how you then interact with people going forward, because you won't allow yourself deep connections. Because if you have a thought of, well, I'm a bad person, you don't feel worthy of love. So I think it's more so going, what stories am I believing about myself? Are they actually true? And is it what I want for myself? Because that's where like empowerment actually comes from, is being able to sit down with yourself. And I try to do this every year now, of what of the values that are driving my life? Because when we know what our values are, we can then assess our actions and we can address if there's shame triggers in there. Because usually our values will come from shame. You know, so if I'm feeling like I'm getting things wrong, it's because I want to live a courageous life, which means sometimes making mistakes and having to learn and having to grow. So I think it's about looking at, firstly, what feels important. And when I say that, and this is where I think bridging not just the mind but the body, and I love the way that you keep coming back to like, what are the body symptoms? Because the body's always telling us something. If we look at our values, your body should have that sense of excitement, expansion, like desire. You shouldn't be putting a value down because you think you should. Like, I want to be a compassionate person. I mean, you can have these like general themes in our life. We want to be a good person. We want to be a compassionate person. But with our core values, so say you have 5 for the year that you really want to focus on, it might not be a year where you want to focus on compassion. You might want to focus on leadership for the year, where there is going to be those hard conversations that you need to have and different ways of showing up. So I think it's about constantly assessing ourselves and assessing what our driving factors are.
How do you delineate between, because it's easy to start with that front of mind, like listen to how my body responds, but the conditioning of following what other people project onto me, like there's a lot of external validation as well when we might succeed, but we're doing what our parents said, what society's doing, and it might feel good, but if we sat with ourselves long enough, you know, it would be almost hollow and it wouldn't feel grounded in something that we truly value. So like we still might be getting similar signals, right? Like the dopamine might be running high. But how do we actually delineate, like we might be getting the same signals, but where this signal's coming from? Like how do we actually discern the difference between some of them? Because to be honest, in my own experience, right, when I've gone down more pathways that aren't truly aligned for me, like sometimes you do get the ego. The ego is like a master magician at manipulating us. So it's like, how do we actually start to question that as well?
So having truthful conversations would be one, and getting curious around why people want certain things for you. Like I'll use the example of like my parents wanting me to be well educated. That was because they want freedom for me. And that's freedom is one of my values. But then getting to have conversations with them and being an example of freedom without necessarily the lifestyle that they see or perceive as freedom. So I think when people are putting expectations on us, it's actually about getting curious around, is there a need underneath what they're actually projecting onto us? Because that could be aligned or it couldn't be aligned. And that's where, you know, deeper connection and authenticity gets to come up, because we get to have these more authentic conversations with one another of why is that important to you? Maybe they're in a really insecure place in their life at the moment, and so they're projecting what they want for you on top of you because they don't think they have permission to have it for themselves. And that, you know, whether that's relationship, parents, family, friends, you know, ideally we want to be able to sit in our own autonomous being and trust that someone else will choose the path that feels right for them. Because otherwise we're trying to control someone else's experience. And I don't think that ever necessarily goes down very well. Like that's where we create expectations and friction starts happening.
Because I definitely find there's a lot of hidden agendas like in relationship dynamics between so many people. And yeah, I don't know. I just think people probably don't realize why they spend time with the people that they do. And I think environment's probably the number one factor in people's lives to propel them forward. And I think a lot of people are surrounded by people who are trapping them in an old version of themselves.
Oh, confirmation bias. Yeah, that's where ideally you want to be able to know yourself so well that if you're put in any scenario and people are questioning your values, your lifestyle, whatever it is, you should be able to back your choices, not from a space of I need to guard myself and like, you know, that anger element. Yeah, it's just more of like, no, this actually does feel aligned. And sometimes when we get triggered by someone questioning our choices, maybe we haven't fully owned our choices ourselves. And maybe there are some doubts there, and, you know, that's uncomfortable to sit with if we can't fully back all of our choices. So, you know, being triggered by someone else's reaction to you can either be a mirror of like, okay, I need to own my choices more, and they are aligned, or maybe they aren't aligned. But yeah, I do agree that we create confirmation bias because we're neurologically wired to create efficiency. And so with that, just using the same like autopilot and what we've learned from childhood is going to be an easier route. It takes a lot more energy and awareness and consciousness to be present every moment and ask the questions in every moment. So yeah, it makes sense that we want to kind of go back to efficiency and what we already know, what we feel safe with.
Yeah, we're always competing against the primal brain. It is hard. But I often, there's so many quotes that I love around this, like begin with the end in mind, like all these things that make me question, like, you would have come across like Ernest Becker's work, like the denial of death and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast. Do you know who Alex O'Connor is?
Oh, I don't.
He's a young podcaster. He's like a philosopher, absolute wizard.
Yeah.
Dream guest. But he was talking about the fear of death and how it's like our number one motivating force.
Mm-hmm.
And he was using this idea of like regressing time. So like if someone sat down and said like, you have a week to live, right? Like that changes your urgency and immediacy around what you do with your life.
Yep.
And obviously, you know, within the denial of death, like it's sort of like terror management theory. Like all of our pursuits in life are trying to deny this inevitability that we're going to die. We want to prolong our existence through our legacy. But he was talking about this example around like, you know, let's say you sat someone down and they had a week to live. But then, you know, let's say once if you made that a month and you slowly but surely kept making that longer and longer, right? It's like if you told someone they had a day to live, right, that would, what are they going to do, right? They want to say everything that they wanted to say. They tell the people the things they wanted to do. In a week, maybe they'll have a bit more time to do some meaningful things that they love. Yeah. You take that out to a month. Now they're like, have a bit more time. I can actually... And if you just keep extrapolating it out, it goes to a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and suddenly, are we not doing the same thing?
Yeah, there's not that sense of urgency. It's interesting. So my dad passed away 4 months ago, and that was really one of the first times that I was looking at death in a real way and sitting with the impermanence of everything. And we get little touches of that when, you know, we go through big changes, whether that's breakups or new career paths, and we get those moments of realizing that nothing is permanent. And what's my relationship to that chaos? Do I try and control it or do I surrender into it? And do we, with our relationship to life, trust that life has our best interest at hand? And that's a really big topic because I think a lot of us sit in victimhood of like, why has this happened to me? And instead going, okay, I'm just going to trust this process. And I had a realization, it was my birthday at the beginning of November, and I was like, wow, I literally would not change anything about my life at the moment. I don't have regrets. I don't feel like, if someone was like, you're going to die in a week, I'd probably still be doing exactly what I do now.
That's success.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know, it's those baby steps that I've been cultivating. Like I was reading Eckhart Tolle by the age of like 15. I have always loved psychology. I've always questioned, as I said, I've done yoga since I was 7. Not to say that I've got my life together. Absolutely not. Like there's, you know, I get met with all of these parts of myself that want to hold and control and still meet myself in new ways all the time. But I love the relationship that I have with myself, which someone who's had an eating disorder, that's like you try to not have a relationship. You're trying to bypass your relationship with yourself, really. And so to get to a point where I'm like, wow, cool, I'm actually proud of the woman that I am, and I'm proud of what I do in the world, and I'm, proud of the relationships that I have. I think for me it was just that moment of really trusting in the work that I do and trusting in the power of self-inquiry and trusting in the process of our ever-changing life. And I will say a large part of that also came from my dad, you know, so having him, I wouldn't say that he was Buddhist, but he loved Buddhist principles. So he was walking with the Buddhist monks in Bhutan when I was growing up, and we had Buddhist books in the house. And while I was in the nursing home, you know, I'd read The Art of Happiness, but I'd seen the Dalai Lama a couple of times by the age I was a teenager. So I was exposed to all of these philosophies about how everything is impermanent. And Dad really had this belief of you don't have regrets. Like if you regret, you're not trusting that you made the choice that you were meant to make in that moment. You either learn from like mistakes. We can make mistakes, absolutely. But then it's on you to integrate what you needed to learn from those mistakes and move forward. And yeah, I completed, I feel like, all the loops that I needed to with my dad. We had very direct conversations with experiences that happened in childhood where I wanted to get closure of, like, you know, even simple things of like, oh, you looked away at this moment, or you weren't here for this birthday, or just things like that. And getting to hear the experience from his point of view, and then hearing about his childhood. It's one of the most beautiful and humbling experiences that you can have, is starting to, when you get to an age in adulthood where you can sit down with your parents, realizing that they are so human as well, and hear about their journey and their childhood, and talk openly and honestly about these things. It is one of the most beautiful gifts that you can have. And I feel very grateful that my dad, passed with I didn't have any hesitation or doubt that he loved me. I loved him. There was no words left unsaid. And I do understand it's very rare to have, but it's instilled this principle in me of, if I died tomorrow, are there any conversations that feel like unfinished? And can I hold myself accountable for having those conversations and complimenting people all the time? You know, I think words are often intended but not always spoken. And the power of observing someone and giving them a compliment in that moment is so powerful and creates that ripple effect. So he's instilled some big things for me that I'm still sitting with and integrating. But that's what death, I think, does for you, is it humbles you to knowing that life is impermanent.
Yeah, it definitely brings front of mind like the immediacy of our experience, and it makes us question like what we're doing. I think we get so trapped in like our identity, like our meat suit, and like all the things that we're caught up doing, and it makes us really reflect. Do you think it's possible for people to gain, like, what do you think is the best way to fast track people's spiritual journey and experience? Like, you've cultivated like practices from Eastern, you've gone Western psychology, you've done a lot of research, a lot of learning. What would be the biggest domino? I know it's a broad thing, but like, what are some of the biggest dominoes that people can do?
Yeah, I think follow the thread of excitement, because I think I get curious and I learn and I integrate things when there's a sense of joy and interest there. There's no point if you're like, oh, I want to get into spirituality, and you're like doing the tough yards to do yoga, but you don't really feel like doing yoga. Maybe there's something else that is actually more aligned to you, because they're all different paths up the mountain. It's just finding what works for you. And that's part of the archetypal alchemy framework that I created, is realizing sometimes if I'm talking to someone who's very academic, I studied biomechanics in part of my undergrad. If I start talking to them about chakra systems and spirituality, sometimes a part of them checks out. And that's totally fair, because I'm not speaking a language that resonates with them. If I start going, oh, okay, your movements are more like linear and boxy, and you want to try and create some more fluidity in your movements, which is going to have X, Y, and Z results, that's going to be a language that they can integrate. So, and then we can talk about the emotions. Some people are more emotionally driven. So if I talk to someone, and I might have to go through each of the archetypes. So we've got
let's start with the archetypes. How would you explain them in simple terms?
Yeah, so I'll firstly start, if archetypes isn't a word that you have heard before, it's not some external deity or god or something outside of yourself. It is literally just a part of your psyche. And we have a blank slate when we come into this world, and through our conditioning, whether that's positive or negative conditioning, we get shaped a little bit, or a lot. And some archetypes are suppressed, some archetypes come out in unhealthy ways, and some archetypes are really supported. So, for example, Huntress for me, which is the third chakra, which I'll come to in a moment, that is success, that is identity, that is power. And so that's where I was conditioned to believe if I'm strong in Huntress, if I get things done, if I'm disciplined, then I'm lovable. So my archetype almost went into overdrive as a way of creating connection. I used to find people that sat in the second chakra, which is in the alchemy framework, the lover archetype. I used to get so frustrated and am I allowed to swear on this?
Of course.
All right, cool. I used to get so pissed off. I was like, they're just lazing around. They're lazy. Like, they're just wasting my time. Like, I want efficiency. I want purpose. I want drive. And the more that I've gone into this, like, archetype is really looking at, the archetypes are just triggering what I don't allow in myself or conditioning that I've absorbed from others. And I actually love my lover archetype now.
Just to butt in here, are these archetypes like primal patterns that are encoded into our like DNA? Like, are they inbuilt into us already when we arrive?
Yeah. There's like a group of characteristics or a theme. So, you know, when we call ourselves a lover or a wild woman, wild man, mother archetype, you don't have to be a mother to embody the characteristics and the emotions of that part of your psyche. Some people are just very like motherly in the way that they show up in the world. Again, that's probably positive conditioning that early on they've been a support person maybe for a friend that's having a hard time, and then the friend's giving them lots of compliments because they feel really trusting of that person. So they go, oh, okay, this is part of my identity. This is part of me. And so they foster that motherly archetype. So yes, these are all like a group of characteristics that sit within our psyche.
So do experiences activate certain ones, or do we have like a predisposition to be on a path to be more like one of these archetypes?
Yeah, so I will say, so these aren't necessarily genderized in terms of men can also have all of the feminine archetypes as well, just as women can have masculine archetypes within them. It's about choice. And I use 7 that resonate with me based on what I've observed. But there are hundreds, thousands of different archetypes. Carolyn Mears is a really incredible educator in the realm of archetypes. So if archetypes is something that people want to journey more into, you know, the bully archetype is an archetype. You know, some of us can bully ourselves and take on that archetype and those characteristics that we would perceive in another person.
So what is the differentiating factor between the archetypes? Because obviously our phrasing of archetypes is like a human-made word and label for what these are, but at its core, what differentiates between them? Because I'm sure they would have overlapping behaviours.
Yeah. No, they definitely would have some overlap, but there's pretty strong themes. Like if I said to you, think of some words for wild man.
Wild man. Oh. Wild man. I think of a Texan.
Yeah.
Something to do with violence, strength, chaotic.
Yeah, perfect.
Something like that.
Yeah. So you've nailed it. Like what you also described in there is both positive and negative traits with it. So, and I will say this is just based on what I've observed. So some people might see it differently, but for me, wild man, wild woman sits like at the base of our chakra, like that base of our spine. So the first chakra. So it's our relationship to body, to our primal instincts, to anger, like rage, because that comes from, can I protect myself? Can I protect my boundaries? Do I even have a relationship with boundaries, or do I let people just walk all over me? What's my relationship to my family, my ancestry, to the earth, to the ground, to, you know, where I walk? Do I take care of the land around me, or do I take it for granted? There can be themes of like, what's my relationship to anger? Do I suppress it? Do I avoid it? Does it come out in unhealthy ways? There's a really beautiful quote, like, rage, when it stays just centered down in that first chakra, can be very destructive and internalized. You know, we have a negative relationship with ourselves. When we bring rage up into the heart, it becomes courage. So it's like courage to, can we use anger? Anger is a beautiful emotion that we can have because it shows us what's important for us. It's about, can we protect ourselves? Has someone hurt you or not met an expectation? That's when anger comes up. Doesn't mean projecting the anger on the other person. That's where it's building a relationship with these primal needs and these wants to be able to communicate it effectively with another person. So do I have the courage to be able to speak up for my needs? Do I have the courage to, if someone crosses a boundary, implement actions afterwards? Especially for women, I feel like people cross their boundaries and then this people pleaser comes out of like, oh, don't worry, don't take it too seriously or downplay it. It's like, no, if someone's crossed a boundary, you're allowed to be angry and you're allowed to like feel those emotions. And then it's just, what do you do with it?
Why do you think that is such a common pattern for women to fall in? What do you think the conditioning is for them?
I mean, there's probably like patterning from generations back where the woman was seen but not heard, and it was about just looking pretty or just being a trophy wife. And yeah, I think we're in a time where we're getting to recreate what it is to be a woman, to be a man, to be non-binary. Like we're redefining identity and these gender roles. And it's an exciting time to be in, but with that, we're sitting in chaos with it as well. So it's interesting that you said chaos, because sometimes when everything is changing, do we trust our primal instincts and our ability to cultivate safety internally? Or do we start going into like hyper controlling everything or projecting our insecurities on others? And so actually creating this relationship with our primal instincts, our wild woman, our wild man, like it's very empowering. And it will often then show us like when we get triggered by mess or people that seem like they can't manage their anger, or maybe we can't manage our anger. So each of the archetypes also shows us mirrors of when there's been unhealthy expressions of each of the archetypes.
So do we have expressions of all of them?
We can choose. So I think, so using this framework, we can look at what are the conditionings, what are the stories that I've created which are limiting my sense of self-expression and empowerment. So when we explore these archetypes, it then just creates greater choice. You may not, you may explore wild woman, wild man, feel a sense of choice, but you might just not sit in that archetype a lot. But by exploring it, if a situation comes up where, maybe you need to assert your boundaries or things like that, you don't shy away from it. You trust in that process.
Yeah, because how I'm thinking about it is like we sort of have an essence about us, right? But if we haven't done the work across the myriad of different archetypes or parts of ourselves, we are going to be either triggered or limited in our experience when those do arise, even if that's not the experience of life that we find ourselves in many times. But if we don't have that, it'll also limit us in our own pursuits and our higher values as well, because we'll be scared of conflict or whatever that limiting factor is, will be a handbrake on the things that we truly do love.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, all of these archetypes, really, they'll show up in your life and you'll go through themes at different times in your life. Like I can track back now and be like, oh, that was a time period, like during the PhD, I was really capitalizing on my huntress, my discipline. I was doing a lot of yoga and meditation every single day. I was doing silent retreats. There was this like purity discipline element to me, which I needed at that point. Then there's been times of my life where I'm immersing more in tantra and letting my hair loose and just going out and doing whatever I want. Or it's just different parts and different times in our life we can have these different archetypes come up. And if we're being triggered by another person, it affects our capacity to have authentic connection. which I believe one of my strong things is like I want to have deep, authentic conversations and connections with people in any way. So through that, I need to look at all the times when I'm triggered by another person. And so actually I'll go into the next archetype because there's some stories that I have along with this that might be able to paint some more pictures. So in the second chakra is the lover. So this can sit in like light expressions or dark expressions. So when we're talking about light, and this is light feminine, light masculine, whichever you resonate with, this is more like Madonna whore complex. It's like the Madonna is like very sensual, very caring. They are the one that you would want to marry, really. There's like dependability, there's love, there's devotion. Versus the dark feminine is more that magnetism, it's that allure, it's that sexiness, like owning our sex. Like we are sexual beings. We are literally created through the act of sex. Yet there's so much collective shame around sex and pleasure. And so when we integrate both of these, we allow ourselves to be both the Madonna and the whore, both our light and our dark, and we embrace that that's just part of our sexual expression. Now, in the past, I would have said that like I'm Scorpio and I will resonate with the fact that, you know, I'm a dancer. I'm used to getting a lot of attention. I use sexual energy when I'm dancing as a way of being magnetizing and activating people. But I used to see the light feminine as like boring, or as I said, like they're not doing anything. They're just fluffing around. But that was a real mirror for me of like, oh, I don't give myself permission to slow down and do nothing. And I would keep getting triggered by people because I just wasn't giving myself permission to do nothing and sit with myself and soothe myself and allow myself to be spoiled, not because of something I had achieved, but just because I'm worthy of having love. And so I went, into a big deep dive I studied with a somatic sexologist in America with the erotic blueprints, and ended up realizing that I am very sensually wired, and how I regulate my nervous system and make choices from a really integrated place is by using that light feminine lover. So it's so funny now that I look back of like how much I repressed that for such a long time. When actually it is the deep medicine. And I would attract in a lot of friends and like my best friend is very like the epitome of the lover archetype. And so I attract in all of these people to be reminders of, oh, you need this yourself. So one of the things I would say to people is while you're listening to this, have a think of, are there themes coming up in your life and are there people coming into your life that are actually just trying to reflect back to you maybe something that you need for yourself or that you desire for yourself. I just want to talk into the dark feminine quickly because for women, this can actually come out in very unhealthy ways sometimes. And because the dark feminine energy is so magnetizing, it can be a way of hooking attention. And you can feel the difference in that quality of motivation when I am hooking your attention, probably because I have low self-esteem to try and like grab you and affirm myself, versus if I'm just being an embodiment and if I magnetize you, that's great, but there's also like a detachment to it.
That's the key piece that I think is super interesting. And
I had a really interesting experience around this because this is a really deep thread in what we call the sisterhood wound, is if a woman is embracing their dark feminine energy, it's inherently like a threat of, or what if my partner then wants them more, or I'm not lovable when they're around. And there's a scarcity mentality that comes up if another sister is in their dark feminine energy. But that's not the case at all. Like women can be around each other embracing their erotic energy, and it doesn't take or detract from your own erotic energy. What we can start rewriting as empowered women though is if we sense in ourselves that a friend is using that sexual energy to hook someone else's attention, we can actually start asking the question of, babe, like, what's actually going on? Like, do you need a cheerleader of how amazing you are and a reminder of how amazing you are in this moment, so you don't need to hook the energy? And I've noticed whenever I've been able to have that like really direct conversation with someone, usually they can soften and go, yeah, I'm actually having a really hard time at the moment and I just needed like a bit of attention and a reminder. And then they can realize that the safety is to come to a sister and ask for that affirmation, rather than needing to hook someone's sexual energy to prove that they're lovable.
What are some of the internal signals that women would have though in that moment, like consciously? What would they be? Can you take yourself out of that, or do you need someone external to prove? Like, how can someone create a quicker feedback system inside to know that they're?
I think you will know if it's yourself and you're wanting just to boost your self-esteem, because then there's an attachment to getting what you want. So, say if you're trying to hook attention and they don't give it back, maybe there's like a moodiness, or maybe there's like, well, whatever, like there's defensiveness. You're not able to hear no, versus if you're just sitting in your sexual energy and someone is magnetized to you, then there's no expectation there. But when it comes into relationship to another person, I would never say come in with righteousness. I come in with curiosity of like, hey, I observed this behavior. Is everything all good? It's just asking the question. It's not going, oh, you're hooking your energy at the moment, and like that's coming.
Because it's easy to project from a place of
absolutely
shame as well. Like,
so you don't actually know. So that's where it's about asking the questions and just seeing if there's anything there, and trusting that if a conversation needs to come up, that it will come up, or at least that person might not feel safe at first to, but maybe the next time it happens, they go, oh, actually, yeah, I was feeling a bit down today, or rewriting this threat. And it doesn't happen overnight. Like it's continuous. It's like cultivating of safety.
Where do you think women are at in society with their sexuality?
Whoa, big question. I'm excited by the work that is happening in this area. I feel like there are so many mentors, empowerment coaches, like women that are doing the work and walking the talk, that it gives me like hope of what is possible. And that, we have such an access to more information these days that women are starting to question, well, what do I want? Can I speak my needs? Can I educate myself to be able to speak my needs in a way that, feels empowering for all parties? I mean, you use the word sexuality, so I think women are also questioning the boxes that we put ourselves in of like, I don't believe sexuality is as binary as like gay and straight. Like women are getting curious around this flexibility of gender and what they're desired to, and the energetic draw of a person rather than a gender. And like I openly talk about that I'm bisexual, and I only dated women until I was 25. I did almost like the opposite of everyone else, like came out as gay when I was 16 and then realized, oh, maybe I am attracted to men as well, like in my mid-20s. So in terms of sexuality, I feel like there's more of a permission slip that women can explore their sexuality, not as a way of entertaining the male gaze, but because there might be inherent desire there, or maybe by observing other women in their erotic nature, it activates something in themselves as well. There's so many cool things that are happening. Even in Perth, there's so many amazing things.
Do you think men overestimate how much women are interested in them and how much their sexual expression is for them?
Oh, no, I think women do have the desire to be devotional. And there's like this cyclical nature that starts to happen if a man can create safety and this doesn't necessarily need to be in monogamy if that doesn't feel right, but safety gets cultivated by different things. So it might just be transparency in communication style. It could be about owning one's desires. It's really about the relationship building what is safe. But once there's safety there, the woman opens up to be more devotional. And then, there's through that devotion, the man wants to provide more. And this doesn't have to be just in heterosexual relationships. This can happen within homosexual relationships as well. But there is that, the more safety we cultivate in a relationship, the deeper you can go together.
What do you think about monogamy?
Oh, I'm down a rabbit hole at the moment of Esther Perel and all of her work at the moment. I think we should start to question monogamy in terms of it is unrealistic to think that one person is going to provide all of your needs. But I think it's about transparency and truth. And I think some people sit more in the we will be monogamous, but yeah, maybe we're allowed to talk about when we're attracted to another person and not shame that, because then that creates deeper connection to be able to own when there's desire. Or maybe, you do play outside of the relationship. It's really up to, I think, the relationship to govern what feels true and right for them, knowing that it can change at any given moment. You might go through a period of monogamy and then you might want to go up and explore, and then you might want to come back to monogamy and then explore. And I really love the quote that you can date many people in your adult lifetime. Like most people will date many people in their adult lifetime. Sometimes it's just with the same person. And so I think with that is acknowledging, don't try and keep that your initial partner as the same person. You need to give them permission to change and evolve and find new ways of expressing themselves, or, if there's sexual desires, being able to talk about them openly. But yeah, there's so many interesting ways. And I think that's when I studied with the erotic blueprints, it really opened my eyes to how many different relationship styles are out there, and again, what feels true for me in this moment versus maybe what I grew up with which was have the house and the white picket fence and you get married at a certain age. And yeah, that point of being able to question what feels true for me at any given moment.
I really like the idea that you can date multiple people in the same person, because I think it's so true. I think back 2 years ago for who I am and how that's impacted my relationship. My partner and I speak about this, who I am now versus who she is. We both wouldn't have dated the people that we are back then.
Yes.
Because we wouldn't have been connected or magnetized. And obviously we go on a journey of evolution together. Yeah. And I think that's where there's a lot of nuance in this conversation, because from my beliefs, I'm sort of the person who's I don't think you should be telling people how they can be. I think there's a freedom in our world to be who you want to be. But I think it's very interesting because I read a lot about the ineffectiveness of polyamorous relationships and the research behind it showing that it's not effective and people aren't happy in those relationships. So there's this freedom of expression, but then we have also this nature in our primal brain that's also, and I'm trying to thread a lot of bows there. Yeah,
but it's interesting. I would almost say the same, we could look at monogamous relationship. There's probably a lot of people that aren't fully happy in a monogamous relationship. Not that they want something externally, but I've observed that it's if you're in a long-term relationship, it's natural for desire to reduce. I'm is that something that we believe or that we've been conditioned to believe? Have we actually questioned that? Why does desire have to dissolve over time? So yeah, I would be interested to explore what the research would be. And you look at the rates of divorce and things like that, and it's maybe a lot of people aren't happy in monogamous relationships. I don't have an answer. I keep questioning it all the time. And that's where I think maybe there should be fluidity and a constant conversation with your partner around what feels true for you. Me and my partner do something called cheeky check-in. We've done it since the beginning of our relationship 6 years ago. Every 3 to 4 months, we do like a little relationship audit and really having those conversations. And so I think we need to start incorporating that in relationships rather than go, cool, we get together and then we just kind of trust it'll keep going. It's holding each other accountable for the relationship that you want, because you're two entities, you're two individuals, and then as a relationship you create this other entity really, and it's like, well, how much time and energy are you putting into that as a separate entity to yourself? And what do you want to put in that bubble? Like, what values do you want? Do you want freedom? Do you want self-expression? Do you want safety? Do you want transparency? Like, you get to co-create that together, but you need to be willing to have the conversations, and sometimes they're hard conversations of, yeah, my need's not being met in this area at the moment. And then you take an action together. From
the women's perspective, what do you think is missing in terms of fulfillment for a lot of women in their relationships?
Oh. So men and women are like neurologically wired differently. Like, if you think about the hunter-gatherer like lifestyle, it was like the women were primed to need safety, need the protection. And so with that, I think we can downplay what our desires are, because if the desires can't be met, then there's a risk that they're going to leave. And so we're starting to go into an era of, it's safe for me to have desires, and if someone then leaves, then they're not the right alignment. You know, which is a hard truth to sit with sometimes. And stereotypically, not all the time, women seem to be a bit more of the anxious attachment style of, don't ruffle the feathers and don't speak up too much because we want to keep the peace and we want that people pleaser. The people pleaser comes out.
I'm interested. Do you think that that's like, I don't want to use the wrong terminology here, but like, do you think that's more of the feminine wound? Because I was more of the anxious type, but I know that was coming from more of the feminine energy. I don't know. Maybe take me through your perspective on the masculine and feminine energies. There's I've interviewed a lot of people about it, had so many different perspectives.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't say that I am an expert in this area. I can only really speak from my own experience. And I think, having dated women for a long period of my life, I had to cultivate that masculine energy as well as feminine energy in my relationship styles. But in saying that, even if I was in my masculine energy, the same fears can still come up. And I don't think with the attachment style, and I don't know the attachment style a lot, but I don't really believe in like that permanence. Like, I think we can have moments of anxious attachment. I also know there's times where I'm avoidant attachment. So I don't know the attachment style, like the theory of it too well. So I don't know if it actually does speak into this fluidity of things.
It's very broad, and the categorization is very like binary, and it doesn't allow for like, I think it's, you know, they had, like a lot of Western psychology, a lot of these studies there's a replication crisis, and like the same thing applies to those attachment styles. Like in general, you know, they have accuracy, but specificity,
But I think the idea with any framework, because I love frameworks, the framework should only ever be about a tool to allow you to have deeper introspection. So in a relationship style, it's quite common that anxious and avoidance will magnetize each other. The polarities exist.
Exactly.
But what really it's asking is, for the anxious attachment style, can I learn to speak up for what my needs are and self-soothe me, so I'm not constantly like just asking. And so it's really being able to sit with that like part of you that's scared for someone to leave. That shows you actually that you care about someone. That's a beautiful trait to have. And likewise with the avoidant, it can be, well, why am I scared of like being with someone or that deeper commitment. Maybe there's a fear of getting things wrong. Maybe it's easier to leave before someone else leaves. So there's fear of actually
abandonment.
Being abandoned.
Both ways. It's funny how the same root fear, like fear of abandonment, can show up as anxiousness. Like I need you need to affirm me all the time. But also like you cultivate the strong sense of independence as a way to cope. So the same fear can get rooted in any direction.
So yeah, I always use these frameworks of a mirror for deeper introspection. So, because there's some relationships in my life where my anxious attachment style comes up more, and there's been other relationships where I'm really avoidant. And then there's sometimes when there's just like healthy. And even within the same relationship, I will have the different themes come up. So over time, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going more into an anxious pattern. Maybe I need to do some more yoga practice or whatever feels soothing for me in this moment. Maybe I need to articulate with my partner so it creates deeper connection through authentic relating, not blaming or shaming the other person or trying to control them, because then I think that just wedges people further apart, but just taking accountability and ownership of, hey, these things that are coming up for me at the moment. If you're open to it, I would really love, I don't know, a text message every third day to help regulate my nervous system. It's being able to make really clear actions that the other person can either say yay or nay to, so that you create a deeper bond over time.
Do you think on the theme of sexuality, do you think we need polarity for sexuality and magnetism?
Great question. Yes, I think so, but I don't think that it needs to be the same direction all the time. Like in the kink world, we call it like being a switch. And that doesn't, like, the man doesn't have to be the one who's being dominant and all the characteristics of being masculine. The woman might be the one that's taking control. And that can be even as simple of like, cool, I'm organizing date night. You're just showing up and you're going to do what I say tonight. And there's actually something really empowering about a woman being able to make the choices. But again, it also depends on your wiring. If you're someone that really genuinely loves just sitting in the like feminine characteristics, you'll probably attract in a partner that likes being in the masculine polarity of things. And if you attract in someone that just wants to be in the feminine all the time, then that's more of a different discussion that you need to like talk into. But I think we often attract in a partner that mirrors what we desire or our tendencies, or what we want to, at least, or what our psyche wants to at least.
I agree. Like, I guess depends what framework you use, but a lot of the one I do like from DeMartini is like, we attract in the people to teach us to love a part of ourselves that we've disowned.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I really like that.
And I guess that takes us up. I feel like we're unpacking each of the chakras and archetypes very slowly. We made it to the second chakra, but all the themes that we're starting to talk about come up to the third chakra, which is the huntress or hunter or like warrior. I call it like the modern day boss. Like, can you take ownership? Like, can you depend on yourself? Do you have a purpose? Like, if you actually sit with yourself, do you feel aligned with your purpose? And it doesn't necessarily mean what you do for work. You might feel really aligned with being a mother in this lifetime. That is your purpose. Maybe your purpose is to be an embodiment of unconditional love to anyone that you meet. But really getting clear on that, clear on your values, clear on your actions. And one of the big themes that I see in this area is we often in this society try to be everything rather than, and we're trying to do everything. It's like we wear a badge of honor if we're busy all the time. It's seen as a good thing. And I actually don't believe or subscribe to that anymore. I'm like, do you know your values? Have you made those targets? And then like an archer, are you like putting that bow and arrow straight to what you're actually desiring and working towards? Because in that way, your life is sustainable rather than this burnout that often happens by trying to do everything. And yeah, so the boss is around, what do I want my identity to be shaped around, and taking actions based on that.
I feel like the only problem with life advice is the people who need to hear the exact message aren't the ones who hear it. I saw Chris Williamson say this thing, it was perfect. But like, for example, like the men who need to hear to be more masculine, maybe step up and organize a date night for once and take a bit of lead for once in their relationship because they've never done it. You know, it confirms that like, oh, I don't have to be that. Like, you know, it soothes a part of their ego that, you know, maybe they're scared to organize it. They don't want to fail. So, and, you know, the men that maybe are over controlling, like, you know, they don't acknowledge that message at all. Like that's, I feel like the internet is like a echo chamber, a confirmation bias.
Yeah.
And the same thing, you know, with what you were saying, like with the hustle thing, right? The people who probably need to hear the message that maybe you do need to put your head down a little bit and work a little bit harder because maybe they have just been lackadaising through life and they do need to find something that they love and put energy into it. And it soothes their ego, like, just pleasure maximizing, it's all good. And then the people who've been hustling and grinding won't acknowledge that message because they're overstimulated, they're overfocused. So I know it's an interesting one, isn't it? Like I think life is going to continually present every individual with exactly what they need.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly believe. And, you know, sometimes we listen to those messages and sometimes we don't. And that's sometimes big life events then happen to give us those wake up calls. Sometimes we change, sometimes we choose the same patterns again. But often the patterns will just keep repeating if you don't address them. It's like what you resist persists, you know. So life keeps giving you those themes. I feel like we've talked a bit into that archetype. So we'll move on to the next one. So heart chakra for me is like mother and father, like not actually becoming a mother or father. Like I don't necessarily want to be a mother. I feel like my characteristics of being motherly and, you know, unconditionally loving comes out in other ways and how I can relate to people in other ways. But yeah, there's the themes of like having an open heart, forgiveness, like can you actually deeply forgive someone even when they've wronged you? And they're the storyteller. Like I think about that idea of like as kids we get to sit down and like read all of these like storybooks, and it's like, do you give yourself permission to acknowledge the story of your life? And I've created a solo like theatre and dance show which is based on my life. It's called Black Sheep, and it was actually one of the most beautiful, cathartic, but also like motherly process of being able to own my story and again be proud of myself. And often we're living out these childhood desires of wanting to make our parents proud in some shape or form. And so by actually doing that and like parenting myself in some ways and parenting this like little child within that does want to impress people, that does want attention, that does want love, that wants to know that they're enough and that someone's proud of them. And so can I be the one that gives that to myself of like, yeah, I am proud of you and I am proud of what you're doing in the world. And yeah, it's a really beautiful archetype to start sitting with. Sometimes it will mean that like themes around your own mother and father come up. And yeah, can we really believe that idea that our parents were doing the best that they could? They were, like with the conditioning they had, with the experience that they had. And can we, from that space, forgive anything that we felt like was lacking or not done well or anything that's sitting there? Because all of us have our stories from parents, or if you didn't have parents, that also like if your parents weren't around, that also creates stories as well. So yeah, it's a big conversation to look at, and I think it's something you don't heal overnight. All of these themes are not something that you just wake up, have the realization, and it's changed. It will keep coming and showing and giving you the themes so you can keep sitting with yourself in different ways and different expressions. So that leads us up to our throat, which in the alchemy framework is inner child. because children don't hold back. They just say things. They blurt it out. Like I used to work at a science museum as a puppeteer, and kids halfway through the show would just be like, "I'm bored." I'm like, "Whoa, okay, yeah." I had checked out and I wasn't really being present. I was going on autopilot. Like kids can just name it when they can tell that you're not being fully there and fully present. But it's also, ability to speak up, to have play. What's our relationship to curiosity, to fun, not taking ourselves too seriously. And, there's some interesting dynamics that once you have this alchemy framework or this archetypal framework, you can start to look at, there's some people that take on this mother or father archetype too much. And then they resent other people that sit in this play and don't have responsibility and do whatever they want. And that's usually a reflection of, well, maybe just you need to incorporate a bit more play and not take yourself too seriously. And likewise, if someone sits only in child, they can start to get triggered by like, oh, you're just trying to control me, or you're, overbearing, or you're going to abandon me, and all these other themes start to come up. So all of these archetypes have different patternings that typically happen. And I work with people to look at what triggers are coming up and what patterns might be playing out, and how do we rewrite those patterns by exploring those archetypes that maybe just want to be explored in that moment. We've got two more. Third eye is Priestess or Magician. And this is our relationship to, the unseen. It's the things that aren't in the five senses. It's like that sixth sense. It's your own path. It's trusting in something more than yourself. It doesn't need to be religious or spiritual, but it's a deep trust and a surrender in your own path. And your relationship to listening. Like, do you listen? Like we've said, do you listen to the themes of the experiences that are happening in your world and learn from them? Or do you just shut that down? You're like, no, just keep going, keep charging forward. Because life is always just teaching you things and sending you messages. And then the last one is Queen or King, and it's about authenticity, your unique expression. And typically this starts to be activated when you have a relationship with all the other six, and no one can tell you how to embrace your king or your queen. It's just about taking responsibility for your life, for your choices, for your community. So being in service to something greater than just yourself. And I grew up around drag queens. So my queen's super sassy and flamboyant. She's great. Versus I know other people that are very poised and graceful and just regal in the way that they present themselves when they're in that archetype. So that's a very, very short overview of all of them. But the way I describe it, it's just a roadmap for understanding self-expression. And you can choose to bring one forward. So if I'm going into, a big change in business, I might be putting on a track that makes me feel powerful and using movement and self-expression to get me into that archetype each morning, to awaken it so that I can move through the day with that awareness. Or, you can do, the power poses and things like that. Or there might be a time in my life where you need to go inwards a bit more and self-nurture. Or life might just give you those experiences that push you to go inwards and activate a particular archetype or look at a particular archetype.
Any concluding thoughts?
I mean, one of the quotes that came up before was, this too shall pass. And I always like that as a little reminder of, regardless of what you're going through at any given time, it's going to pass and something else is going to come. And that might be, a reminder if you're having a really amazing time in your life, something will inevitably change. And so it makes you appreciate when times are good, allow yourself to fully receive it. And when things are bad, you know that that's going to pass as well. So, trust and surrender.
Where can we go to find more of your work?
go to my Instagram's usually the best way to find me. So Dr.Jae_West. And yeah, all of my links to my other work is from there.
Awesome. Dr. Jae West, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.